Frankie, can we start?
Yes, we're good to start.
Good day, colleagues, distinguished guests, fellow ombudsmen, practitioners, and friends of good governance across Africa and beyond. My name is Thandi Sibanyoni, and I'm not the public protector, but I'm standing in for the public protector of South Africa, Advocate Gcaleka. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another African Ombudsman Research Centre webinar. AOMA webinars are particularly special because they bring together individuals who are passionate about ombudsman work from across our continent and beyond. They provide a valuable platform for learning, knowledge exchange, and professional engagement amongst practitioners committed to advancing accountability, fairness, and citizen-centered governance. As the Chief Executive Officer of the Public Protector South Africa and a member of the AOMA board, I am delighted to have you have taken the time to join us today, and we are glad to be spending this time with you today. This webinar responds to the growing need to better understand the mandates, processes, and practical contributions of sectoral ombudsman institutions within the broader accountability ecosystem. Today's discussion seeks to demonstrate how pension, insurance, and tax ombudsman offices complement the work of national ombudsman institutions and contribute to effective oversight, citizen protection, and the strengthening of public trust. Participants will gain valuable insight into the roles these institutions perform, the complaints they address, and the practical ways in which they contribute to responsive governance and effective redress mechanisms for citizens. AOMA continues to play an important role in advancing the vision of the African Ombudsman and Mediators Association, AOMA, through research, advocacy, training, and peer learning initiatives. These webinars form part of the broader effort to strengthen our institutions, develop our staff, and enhance our collective capacity to serve the people of Africa more effectively. Today, we are privileged to be joined by experienced practitioners and subject matter experts who will share their knowledge and practical experiences, highlighting the mandates and contributions of pension, insurance, and tax ombudsman offices in strengthening fairness, accountability, and citizen protection within Africa's good governance landscape. The importance of these institutions is becoming increasingly evident across the continent. Recently, I had the honor of hosting delegations from the tax ombudsman of offices of Tanzania and Nigeria during benchmarking visits to South Africa. It was encouraging to witness the growing recognition amongst African countries of the value of establishing specialized ombudsman institutions that serve as trusted interfaces between citizens and public authorities when service delivery falls short of expectations. Before we proceed with today's program, I would like to take this moment to wish all of you a happy Africa Day, which we celebrated yesterday under the theme 63 Years of Unity, Integration, and Development. Let's celebrate together. This theme reminds us of our shared commitment to the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and the collective responsibility we bear in building the Africa we want. It is particularly fitting that this year's focus is on water security, an issue that speaks directly to human dignity, sustainable development, and effective governance. I would also like to seize this moment to express my sincere appreciation to the International Ombudsman Institute, IOI, and the African Renaissance Fund for their invaluable support. Their belief in the vision of AOMA and their financial contributions make it possible for these engagements, such as this one, to be accessible not only to our English-speaking participants, but also to colleagues who speak Arabic, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Diversity is one of our Africa's greatest strengths, and we are proud to demonstrate our commitment to inclusivity in practical and meaningful ways. On behalf of the chairperson of the AOMA board, Advocate Gcaleka, the Public Protector of the Republic of South Africa, I wish you a rich, insightful, and meaningful engagement today. I will now hand over to Advocate Tlotliso Polaki, the Ombudsman of Lesotho, to take us through the program for the day. Obrigado, merci, gracias, Shukran, and thank you. Advocate?
I hope I'm audible enough.
You're audible now.
Thank you.
You are audible.
Yes. Thank you very much, Thandi Sibanyoni, the CEO of the Public Protector South Africa, on behalf of Honorable Advocate Gcaleka, for those thoughtful and inspiring reflections. Your remarks have reminded us that accountable institutions remain central to democratic governance, public confidence, and the protection of citizens throughout our continent. Allow me at this point to pay my respects to Your Excellencies, Honorable Ombudspersons, distinguished guests, colleagues, ombuds representatives, partner institutions, oversight practitioners, members of academia, civil society representatives, and participants joining us from across Africa and beyond. I wish to distinctly acknowledge Honorable Advocate Gcaleka, our host as chairperson of the African Ombudsman Research Centre, AORC, and the second vice president of the International Ombudsman Institute Executive Committee and the current Public Protector of South Africa. I also wish to acknowledge the panelist speakers of today. Your Excellencies, it's really a pleasure to be your program director for today's webinar. It is my honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this important Africa Day 2026 celebration webinar hosted by AORC, the research and training arm of the AOMA, the African Ombudsman Mediators Association, in collaboration with the IOI, under the theme showcasing sectoral ombudsman, spotlighting pensions, insurance, and tax ombudsman officers. As we commemorate Africa Day 2026, we are reminded not only of Africa's shared history and aspirations, but also of our collective responsibility to strengthen institutions that protect rights, promote fairness, and build public confidence in governance systems across our continent. Today's webinar is particularly important because it highlights the growing and often underappreciated role of sectoral ombudsman institutions in advancing accountability, economic justice, ethical administration, and citizen protection. Specialized ombudsman offices in pensions, insurance, and taxation. They play quite a critical role in resolving very complex complaints sometimes, protecting rights, addressing maladministration, and strengthening public trust in key financial sectors. Today, we will be exploring the mandates, the processes, and systemic contributions of these sectoral ombudsman offices and how they can complement national ombudsman institutions within the broader accountability framework. Across Africa, citizens increasingly engage with complex pension systems, insurance services, and taxation structures that directly affect livelihoods, dignity, financial security, and socioeconomic participation. Complaints arising in these sectors are frequently technical, sensitive, and far-reaching. Sectoral ombudsman offices, therefore, play a vital complementary role within the broader accountability ecosystem by resolving specialized disputes, improving fairness in administrative and service delivery processes, identifying systemic challenges, strengthening public trust, and enhancing access to effective redress mechanisms. So this webinar also reflects the broader aspirations of the African Union's Agenda 2063, particularly the vision of accountable institutions, responsive governance, human rights protection, and inclusive socioeconomic development across Africa. We're equally grateful for the continued support provided through the African Renaissance and International Cooperation Fund of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, DIRCO, which supports AORC's broader capacity building program across the continent. Allow me also to acknowledge the important contribution of the IOI, whose global commitment to strengthening ombudsman institutions through research, capacity development, and shared learning continues to support accountability institutions worldwide. We warmly welcome all participants and thank you for joining this continental engagement. Now, before we proceed, allow me briefly to also mention a few housekeeping matters. So we'll have simultaneous interpretation available in English, French, Arabic, Portuguese, and Spanish. Participants are kindly requested to also keep their microphones muted until and unless invited to speak. And any questions may be submitted throughout the session using the chat function. And selected questions will be addressed during the interactive discussion segment. We also respectfully request all speakers and participants to observe time in the interest of ensuring meaningful and participation and engagement. I think with that, we can now move on to our first presentation segment. It is my pleasure at this point to introduce to you Ntate Lebogang Mogashwa. He's the Pension Funds Adjudicator of South Africa. Ntate Mogashwa is an admitted advocate of the High Court of South Africa and a highly experienced retirement funds and governance executive with over 17 years expertise in pension funds law, governance, dispute resolution, commercial law, and fund administration. He holds an LLB from the University of Limpopo, postgraduate diploma in commercial and business law, a Masters of Management in Governance and Management from the University of Wits, Witwatersrand, and an LLM in Mercantile Law, cum laude, from the University of Pretoria. He also completed an executive development program at the University of Stellenbosch. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Mogashwa served as Deputy Principal Executive Officer and Company Secretary of the Eskom Pension and Provident Fund. He previously held several senior positions at the Office of the Pension Fund Adjudicator, rising from legal intern to Senior Assistant Adjudicator, where he authored landmark determinations upheld by the Supreme Court of Appeal. He's also served as Senior Corporate Legal Counsel at the South African Tourism and as a member of the Management Committee of the South African Tourism Board Pensions Fund. I think with that, Ntate Mogashwa will present to us on the mandate, the processes, and linkages to the National Ombudsman. So his presentation will provide valuable comparative insight into how pension ombudsman institutions contribute to fairness, specialized dispute resolution, and broader accountability systems. Honorable Mogashwa, you may proceed. And as you do so, please, if you can also reflect on some of the pre-submitted questions that were shared with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Polaki. I appreciate the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Lebogang Mogashwa, and I'm the Pension Funds Adjudicator appointed by the Minister of Finance with effect from December 2025. And I'd like to first thank the organizers of this webinar for the opportunity for us to mark Africa Day by talking about our organization and how we add value to the lives of ordinary South Africans and who really depend on us to have access to justice in relation to issues relating to their pension funds. I hope that everyone can see my presentation. I've already introduced myself, but today I just want to talk very briefly about what the office does, how we handle complaints, how we fit into the National Ombud ecosystem, and how we create value for the retirement funds industry, for financial services sector, and for users of those systems. Now, the Office of the Pension Funds Adjudicator was established with effect from 1998 through an amendment that was made to the Pension Funds Act in setting provisions relating to the office. The office is a PFMA Schedule 3 entity, so we are a public entity. We account to the National Treasury and to Parliament regularly on the activities of our office. The primary mandate that informs the establishment of the adjudicator is essentially, and it's really the hallmarks of any Ombud system and any Ombud office. It's to resolve complaints in an economic, expeditious, and procedurally fair manner. And there's a specific definition or meaning of this complaint, which I'll talk about later. So we have to, the mandate that we have is to investigate these complaints economically. We do so with speed, expeditiously, and we do so by following due process, which is why you see procedural fairness as one of the tenets of the mandate of the adjudicator. We investigate these complaints and make a determination. And in making the determination, we must consider, we are obliged by law to consider the law, what the law says, but also principles of equity. So you can look at us not only as an office that looks squarely at what the law says, but also we overlay it with equity to make sure that ultimately there's fairness for consumers or for the complainants who approach our office with their complaints. As I said, we issue determinations after our investigation, and our determinations are equal to a civil judgment of a court of law, and they can be enforced as you would any ordinary order of a court of law. I saw there was a question that asked what we do to ensure enforcement. From our side, those determinations are equal to a civil judgment of court, and you can obtain a writ of execution against the respondent, or you can obtain, or you can actually pursue contempt proceedings or contempt of court proceedings if the person against whom we've made an order does not comply with that order. The office is led by myself, and I'm supported by a team of legally qualified investigators. So as I said, primarily our mandate is to dispose of complaints in a procedurally fair, economic, and expeditious manner. And these are the hallmarks of any Ombud system. As I said, the value and the defining feature of any Ombud system is really speed, accessibility, and simplicity of processes. And that's what the Office of the Adjudicator is all about. That's what we are mandated to make sure that we do in how we resolve complaints. Now, having said that, what's a complaint? We investigate complaints, but I need to mention here that complaints do not only relate to a retirement fund. So in other words, the respondent is not always a retirement fund. Respondent can also be an administrator of a retirement fund. It can also be an employer who participates in a retirement fund. But the important requirement for a complaint that we can investigate is that it must relate to the administration of the fund. And there's quite a lot of things that fall under the administration of the fund. So that's a very broad definition. Administration of a fund. It must relate alternatively to investment of the assets of the fund, or it must relate to the interpretation and application of its rules. So this is the first hurdle. When a complainant approaches us, this is the first hurdle that we have to look at and satisfy ourselves that this is a complaint. It must relate to the administration of the fund, must relate alternatively to investment of its assets, or the interpretation and application of its rules. But that's not the only requirement. The additional requirement is that in addition to that first hurdle that I spoke about, the second hurdle is that it needs to make at least one of the allegations that you see there on the slides. Firstly, the complainant can allege that someone has taken action or acted in a way that or exceeds the powers that they have by law, by rules, or whatever the source of that authority might be, or that they improperly exercise their powers. They can complain about having suffered actual or potential prejudice as a result of the actions or decisions of a respondent. They can also argue that there's a dispute relating to facts or a dispute relating to the law, which needs to be determined by the adjudicator. Or they can also argue that the employer has failed to comply with the responsibilities that they have to the member and to the fund in terms of the rules. So that's the second hurdle. In addition to looking at the first hurdle around administration, investments of assets, interpretation and application of the rules, we need to see from the complaint that these additional allegations are made in the complaint. When a complaint meets these requirements, it is then a complaint which we can investigate as the adjudicator. But having said that, there are certain jurisdictional limitations that we have. So even if on the face of it, your complaint is a complaint as defined, there are areas or instances where we might not have jurisdiction. One is in relation to prescription or time barring. In terms of the Act, Section 30I, you must lodge a complaint within 3 years of a dispute arising. So if you have a dispute with a retirement fund, you must lodge that complaint with us within 3 years, or else we're not going to be able to investigate it. Secondly, if you have a complaint, but before approaching us, you launched court proceedings in another civil court, then Section 30H2 of the Act says we cannot investigate that complaint. So we have to let the court decide and not investigate that complaint. Thirdly, where there's a Section 15B surplus apportionment, we do not investigate that because there's a specific tribunal that gets set up to investigate those things. But we do have jurisdiction over 15C surplus, which is surplus that arises after the surplus apportionment date. We also do not have at the moment jurisdiction to investigate complaints against retirement funds to which the state contributes or pays contributions, and which are not registered under the Pension Funds Act. And examples of these are the Government Employees Pension Fund, the Transnet Pension Fund, Post Office Pension Fund. But I do need to hasten to add here that there's a law that's currently in progress in South Africa. It's called the Conduct of Financial Institutions Act. And that act, one of the intentions under that act is to bring all of these retirement funds under the Pension Funds Act, which would then mean that they would fall under the jurisdiction of the adjudicator. But as of today, as we speak, we do not have jurisdiction over the GPF and those funds. And if you think about it, those are very large funds, especially the GPF in terms of assets under management in the country. The GPF is the largest fund, potentially even in Africa, in terms of the assets that they have. And it's very important that they are regulated under the same regulatory framework that applies to other retirement funds as well. Where there's a business rescue that's been instituted in a company or an employer that is the subject of proceedings before the adjudicator, we don't have jurisdiction. And that's because Section 133 of the Companies Act says if a company is under business rescue, then there's a moratorium that's placed on any legal proceedings against that company. So we will not be able to investigate that until the business rescue proceedings are concluded and that moratorium is lifted. Section 14 transfers, this is where you want to transfer assets held in one fund to another retirement fund. The FSCA has the authority to approve those transfer applications. So a complainant cannot come to us and request an order for the transfer to be approved. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority will approve that. Similarly, a complainant cannot lodge a complaint challenging a rule amendment approval by the FSCA. That's dealt with by the FSCA. Matters that fall within the ambit of other ombuds, such as the NFO, etc., those will then be redirected to the relevant ombuds offices. Typical complaints, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but complainants regularly complain about benefit payments, whether it's a withdrawal because they resigned, whether they're retiring, whether it's a disability or death. And typically they query payment, how it was calculated, whether all contributions were included in there, whether the fund has a right to withhold that payment of that benefit, etc. And in South African law, when people divorce, one of the assets that can be divided between the parties is their retirement savings held in a retirement fund. And when courts make this order, we typically see complaints from complainants who say that the fund refused to pay or query the calculation of the amount that needs to be paid to them. With retirement annuity funds, where you stop paying contributions prematurely, in some funds you get what we call causal event charges, which are like penalty charges for premature termination of the retirement annuity policy. And we do get complaints for us to assess whether those charges are excessive or reasonable. Distribution of death benefits when members pass away, we have jurisdiction to consider whether a retirement fund has distributed the retirement savings that the deceased member had in the fund in a way that aligns with the provisions of the law. Other types of complaints include employer duties. This is where employers fail to pay contributions in terms of the law. In other words, they make a deduction from your salary, but they don't pay it over to your retirement fund, which is a prevalent problem in South Africa. And last year, for example, about 51% of the complaints that we closed actually related to this problem. So it's a very prevalent problem. And we're seeing it not only in the private security sector, where it historically used to be prevalent, but now we're seeing it also in the municipal or local government space as well, where some municipalities are failing to pay contributions that were deducted from people's salaries. People can also complain about investment returns and general maladministration. How you lodge a complaint, you can walk in, you can come to our office to hand deliver, you can lodge a complaint on our website, you can email us, you can post, you can fax. Believe it or not, we still have fax, and you can lodge a complaint by fax if you want to. But by law, we need to then give an opportunity to whoever you're complaining about to comment on the allegations that have been made against them. And we will, if you complain against a fund, for example, we'll send a letter to them, giving them an opportunity first to try to resolve the matter with you within 20 days. And if that solution is not forthcoming, then we register that as a formal complaint. And then we will then send out a letter requiring a formal response from the fund and from any other party that's implicated. We'll collate all the evidence that we need in order to make a determination. And then we will make a determination, apply the law to the facts. And that determination, as I said, has the effect of a judgment of a court of law. And you can then enforce it in the same way that you would enforce any judgment of a court of law. If you're not happy with our ruling, you have two options. You can challenge our ruling before what we call the Financial Services Tribunal for reconsideration within 60 days of that determination. But you can also apply to the High Court of South Africa in terms of Section 30P of the Pension Funds Act to have that determination set aside. And it's very low numbers of rulings from our office that get overturned by the courts and the FST. And I think that's a testament to how robust our investigation processes are and how thoroughly we apply the law to the facts. Now, in terms of where we are in the National Ombuds system, we are one of, there are many role players or several role players in the Ombuds system or the ecosystem for retirement funds, including National Treasury from a policy perspective, the Ombud Council that is authorized by law to make sure that there's coordination between all the Ombud offices in financial services. There's also the FSCA, which is the primary regulator, and we are the dispute resolution center in that ecosystem. So there's policy, there's a regulator supervising, but when something goes wrong and someone needs redress, the office of the adjudicator does that, and we also utilize the rules that are published by the Ombud Council to then investigate those complaints and make sure that they're handled appropriately. Now, in terms of the value that we create for the industry and for users, firstly, I think the most important thing, and I think this point has been made by the introductory remarks that have been made, we are primarily there to foster confidence in the retirement fund sector. When people know that if something wrong, they have effective relief or effective redress, which they can have recourse to, then they can use the system with greater confidence. And that's important. That's an important job of the adjudicator. So essentially, you heard me talk about treasury from a policy perspective, etc. All those policies ultimately need to be tested to make sure they deliver the services or they deliver the effect that is desired, and that there's someone who guarantees the implementation of those policies. And the adjudicator is one of the most important instruments to do that. Because when we look at laws and policies and they say this is how members need to be treated, if something goes wrong, the ultimate guarantor or the guarantor that a retirement fund is going to comply with that is the adjudicator, because you lodge a complaint with us and then we make sure that a retirement fund does what they're supposed to. But also our rulings have shaped industry practice for many years. We've been in existence for close to 30 years now. Our rulings have shaped industry conduct. They've shaped pension jurisprudence. Many of the laws and regulations and rules that are now in place, some of them have been informed by rulings from the adjudicator. Some of the policy decisions that have been made have been informed by rulings that have been made by the adjudicator. Better governance standards that have been implemented have also been influenced by the adjudicator. So in that sense, we actually provide or help ensure that policy making is evidence-based, and we provide insights into what is happening on the ground and what complaints data is telling us. And we create value as well for users, because people can come to us and they'll have their complaints resolved speedily. As I said, one of the hallmarks of any effective Ombud system is actually how quickly you can resolve complaints, and we strive to do that within 6 months. And you don't pay a fee. Our services are completely free. We can offer our services. You can lodge a complaint in any of the official languages in the country. And we have a very effective dispute resolution methodology. And we always give people an opportunity to resolve issues between themselves. So that's the long and short of it. I hope that I stayed within time. Thank you for listening, and I will still be in the webinar to take any questions that we might have. Thank you. Back to you, Honorable Polaki.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Quite an interesting perspective that you have laid out for us. I think one of the key things that one can say is, you know, as I reflect from where I'm sitting, is the value creation that you highlighted, the role that you're playing as an adjudicator for fostering public confidence and trust within the pension and retirement sector. So when members of the public know that there's an accessible and effective recourse mechanism that is available, they're more likely to actually utilize and trust the system even better. So the role that you play should not be underplayed. as it serves quite an important guarantor of accountability, adherence to pension laws and policies as you articulated, and effective implementation of determinations and rulings, thereby strengthening governance and the protection of retirement fund beneficiaries. I thank you for that. If I may, the next speaker that we have per our program is Ms. Denise Gabriels. I thank you, Ndate. The lead ombuds from the Life Insurance Division, National Finance Ombuds Scheme of South Africa. Ms. Denise, if I may briefly, from her bio, she joined the Office of the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance as an assistant ombudsman in 2018 and was appointed as the deputy ombudsman in 2021 following of the long-term insurance with 3 other financial ombud schemes, namely the ombuds for banking services, ombuds for short-term insurance, and the credit ombuds to form the National Financial Ombud Scheme South Africa. Her title then changed to lead ombuds Life Insurance Division. Prior to joining ALTI, she served as a senior legal advisor at a large life insurance company, and she brings over 30 years of experience in the financial services industry with expertise spanning life insurance, retirement funds, and LIPs. Ms. Gabriels holds a BA Social Sciences, an LLB, an MBA, as well as a postgraduate diploma in financial planning and legal practice. She has also obtained certificates in compliance management and money laundering. She will speak on protecting policyholders and supporting national oversight. Her presentation will help us better understand the role of insurance ombudsman mechanisms in consumer protection, ethical financial conduct, and responsive governance. Ms. Gabriels, over to you. You have the floor, and you have 15 minutes to do that. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, esteemed colleagues and visitors as well. Thank you. Just a bit of background of the NFO, which stands for the National Financial Ombud Scheme South Africa. It came into operation on the 1st of March 2024, following the amalgamation of 4 predecessor ombud schemes, being the Ombud for Banking Service, the Credit Ombud, and then the offices of the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance and Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance. The 2 insurance ombudsmen had previously undergone a soft amalgamation where we shared common contact details, etc. And this was in response to the World Bank's recommendation to address the fragmentation of ombud schemes in South Africa, financial ombud schemes in South Africa. The NFO operates in a, according to 4, or used to be 4, divisions, roughly aligning with the previous ombuds, separate ombud council. They're led by a lead ombud. Recently, the banking credit ombud were merged into 1 division, and so they've got 1 lead. I'm the lead ombud for life insurance, also known as long-term insurance. And so my presentation will be mostly from that perspective this morning, although the NFO obviously deals with banking, credit, and short-term insurance as well. The NFO is not a statutory ombud scheme as the pension funds adjudicator, the phase ombud scheme, but it is recognized as an industry ombud scheme by the Ombud Council. So the chief ombud of the Ombud Council like to talk about a underpinning of legislative import, but we are an independent body. Ombud Council has oversight of us. Our mandate is derived from our rules, which forms part of a contract between the NFO, the participants, and the complainants. And it is to resolve complaints relating to financial products or financial services offered by a participant. And obviously it's without charge to complainants. And our mandate is to do so in a way that is accessible, effective, efficient, and fair. Fairness encompasses both procedurally and substantial fairness in an impartial, independent, and timely manner, and by applying principles of equity where appropriate. And then also to promote and publicize the NFO to financial customers, including through outreach activities. Financial products that we cover insurance product, both long-term and short-term insurance products, life and non-life insurance products, as well as banking and banking deposits and credit loan agreements. In terms of just to go on to how we support national oversight, in terms of the FSR Act and our rules, the NFO is obliged to report systemic issues identified through complaints, including the identity of the participants, to the FSCA, the FSCA being the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, who is the regulator in South Africa. We also need to engage with the participants regarding the extent of the issues and any proposed remedial action. Trying to get something out of the way here. And then we also have biannual engagement with the Insurers Supervision Department of the FSCA. That's both the lead ombud of the short-term insurance and ourselves, to discuss any issues that we've come across or any systemic or possible systemic issues either within a particular insurer or across the insurance industry, and those that we've identified through complaints. If there are specific issues that arise, obviously before such an engagement is scheduled, we will report directly to the FSCA. And then also through our engagement with the industry, we try and address anything that we think is problematic, not only through rulings, but through meetings with insurers. We also strengthen the national oversight, I think, through applying the policyholder protection rules, which is part of this currently the Long-Term Insurance Act and the Short-Term Insurance Act, and also the treating customers fairly outcomes or principles that are embodied into the PPR. And we take those into investigations and in our investigations and determinations of disputes, and we report a financial institutions' non-compliance with those PPRs to the FSCA. And we also take those into account when we decide on the redress that we want to give to the complainant. Our determination of disputes, we need to, in doing so, we must determine what is, in our opinion, is equitable, fair, and reasonable in all the circumstances by having regard to any applicable laws, including case law. What some of our rulings I've done, and I thought I'll just highlight recent final rulings that we've issued against insurers. Some of them have been reported and published. We are compelled to publish all or a summary of our final rulings against an insurer, including the identity of the insurer, which is another mechanism of ensuring that the financial insurers institutions remain accountable. So one case that we dealt with, for example, was involved a funeral benefit and the recognition of customary marriage. What happened was that the spousal benefit was declined on the basis that the claimant, in our case the complainant, was not married to the deceased. What we discovered was that lobola, in terms of African tradition and custom, lobola had been paid, even though all the rituals might not have been fulfilled. The complainant had also, the insurer had alleged that they were not living together. What we discovered was that it was through economic necessity that the deceased had gone to another city to find work there. When he could no longer find work in the home of the where they had initially set up home, and that they had also had 2 children of the marriage. They were both families recognized the respective partners as the spouses. The insurer then also raised that at the funeral of the deceased, and following the funeral, the spouse and the claimant did not sit on the mattress, which was customary in African law of a spouse, and she didn't mourn him as such. But when we looked at all the circumstances, we said that even though all the rituals, and we looked at case law, and there was the cases that actually pointed out that just because all the rituals have not been fulfilled does not mean that there's not a valid union. And we then ordered the complainant, the insurer, to pay the benefit. Similarly, in another case involving a funeral cover, the complainant had covered family members, and she included the person, the deceased, as a son, although she had not adopted him, nor was he a blood relative. And applying the principles of Ubuntu, which in African law, not in law, but custom, and it's a principle and a value in African law that values of Ubuntu, which inspire and emphasize this communal nature of society and carries in it the ideas of humaneness, social justice, and fairness, and envelopes the key values of group solidarity, compassion, respect, human dignity, conformity to basic norms, and collective unity. We said in the spirit of Ubuntu that this person had raised the child as if he were her own. And although she might not have adopted him, he did not have any other parents, and so the insurer was overly strict by applying these strict definitions in the contract of what they regarded as a son and family member, and we ordered the insurer to pay it. Principles of equity and fairness have also been used in cases of non-disclosure recently, and there's been some development in the constitutional law involving medical aid schemes, where that concept of materiality has been expounded upon, and which we've also now taken on board. In deciding some of our cases on non-disclosure, and where the insurance reliance on non-disclosure at application stage was deemed to be harsh, unduly harsh and unfair. And then just to round up, I thought I'll share some of the stats to show if we are how effective and what we are doing to address and the impact that we have in addressing disputes in the insurance industry. So some of the key stats for 2025, the cases registered for life insurance, the life insurance division, 6,701 cases, and for non-life insurance, short-term insurance, 10,054. Whereas the non-life insurance was slightly down from previous years following non-natural disasters. The life insurance complaints have slightly increased, considerably increased compared to the year before that. And then our cases closed. We closed 5,824 cases last year, and the non-life insurance division 11,428. The life insurance division awarded 299.6 million rand to complainants in redress. Part of that also includes compensation awarded for poor service. In terms of our rules, we are allowed to award up to 50,000 rand for poor service, which includes gross maladministration and for the inconvenience suffered there by the complainant. The non-life insurance division awarded 82.8 million rand to their complainants. On the life insurance side, 27% of complaints were found either wholly or partially in favor of complainants. And on the non-life insurance side, 11% were found in favor of complainants. Obviously, when we say they found wholly or partially in favor of complainants, all the outcomes in favor of a complainant don't necessarily involve an amount awarded to the complainant. Sometimes it's about having a policy reinstated, or obtaining an apology, or getting the beneficiary reinstated, etc. On the life insurance side, the product most complained about, funeral benefits. For 2025, it was still under 55%. For the first 5 months of this year, we're seeing that funeral benefits account for over 55% of our complaints. A big chunk of that is sometimes it's because of the terms and conditions not having been satisfied. For example, the waiting period not having been fulfilled yet. But also what we're increasingly seeing is the challenges to insurable interest, to say that because often funeral benefits cover whole families and extended family members, some of them are quite ill-defined in the policies. And then also, given the circumstances of the South African situation, where people adopt children or don't officially adopt them, they take care of it. Concepts like cousin is not always clear as to what a cousin, a first cousin or a second cousin is. So those give rise to challenges in the funeral benefit space. And then on the non-life insurance side, motor vehicle insurance gives rise to the most complaints. And
Ms.
then
Daniel, Ms. Gabriels, you just have 1 more minute to wrap up, please.
wrapping up, this is the last sentence. So the aspect is claims declined for both and claims related complaints. We received the most complaints about. So just in a nutshell, that was what our office does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that insightful presentation demonstrating how specialized ombuds in your space operate and promote fairness, accessibility, and public confidence in insurance dispute issues. I think overall the presentation demonstrated a growing role of ombuds institutions in advancing sustainable justice and substantive justice, consumer protection, and I think from an Ubuntu compassionate side of things, compassionate dispute resolution outside our normal formal adversarial court processes. So I thank you for the presentation, Ms. Gabriels. Without further ado, I think we should move on to the third presentation because we don't have much time. Our third speaker is Honorable Ruth Owen. She's the Tax Ombudsman of Australia. And please do take note that Ms. Owen will unfortunately not be present live during the webinar. However, her 15-minute video presentation that's titled Addressing Systemic Revenue-Related Complaints and Supporting National Accountability is going to be played. I think it's quite important for us to indicate again that tax administration remains one of the most significant interfaces between the state and citizens, making fairness, transparency, and accountability in this area especially important. Frankie and the team, you may proceed.
Hello, my name is Ruth Owen. I'm the Australian Tax Ombudsman. Thanks for the opportunity to join you on this webinar today. Sorry I can't be there live to take questions. I hope this video is useful for you in explaining my role and how the Australian Tax Ombudsman works. My office was established in 2003, mostly in relation to concerns about the power of the tax office and the impact it was having in its debt collection services, in particular in relation to small business. Early systemic issues within tax administration. We have our own legislation, and that was established in 2003. Then in 2015, we were expanded to take on the services of the Ombudsman in relation to individual taxpayer complaints. So like most ombuds or ombudsmen, I now deal with tax matters in two ways. Firstly, by managing taxpayers' complaints, and that will be where there's been an opportunity for the tax office to resolve the complaint and the complainant still remains dissatisfied. We are the escalation service and taxpayers can come to us. And then secondly, my other function is to address systemic issues within the tax system, be that opportunities to offer opportunities for offering improvement to the system, or to address how the tax system is causing harm in the community, or to the economy or small business, or to address maladministration, or maybe where the tax office is operating outside of its powers or operating not as either community or our parliament would expect. My powers as the Ombudsman are set out clearly in legislation. I am strictly independent from the tax office. I'm independent from government. I'm appointed by the Governor-General of Australia, which is effectively the representative of the head of state. and my office is resourced and funded very separately, both from the tax office and from the finance and treasury departments within the government to maintain that independence. My role is defined in legislation is to improve the fairness and integrity of tax administration within Australia. I also cover some forms of superannuation administration as well. I focus on the word administration because we don't address policy and we don't make recommendations about future legislation, except with some very minor exceptions. To give you a sense of the work that we do, we receive about 3,000 complaints a year from taxpayers, and they will, as you would imagine, generally be raising issues about the service provided by the tax office, delays experienced in contacting the tax office, about tax refunds that haven't been received, about superannuation that's gone missing. And then, of course, the biggest issue is the number of people being dealt with by the tax office under debt collection measures where they're trying to pay their tax back generally, but the tax office isn't accepting a reasonable settlement or payment plan, or they're seeking some form of reasonable solution through hardship arrangements. Those are the kind of complaints that we deal with, but we deal with all forms of tax that are related to our Commonwealth and Federal Parliament. In relation to the systemic reviews that we undertake 4 systemic reviews a year, which I publish independently, both in the website, in the media, and reporting to Parliament. And once a year, I complete an annual report, which sums up all our activity and reports directly to Parliament for me to be accountable to our Parliament on how I've discharged my responsibilities and my resources. My systemic reviews can cover all forms of tax administration. So just to give you a sense of the breadth of the kind of things that I've covered in my tenure, which is I'm just coming up for 2 years in role, I've covered how the tax office communicates with taxpayers. So critiquing the letters that the tax office sends out. I've done a very in-depth critical report on financial abuse within the tax system, how the tax system is weaponized by perpetrators of domestic violence or coercive control. I've undertaken 2 reviews on behalf of the tax profession to look at how the tax office engages and works with the tax professionals, so accountants, tax lawyers, representatives of taxpayers. And very recently, I've completed a report on debt collection and how the tax office manages interest and remittance or release of interest when debt collection is taking place. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the real breadth of really quite deep and tax technical matters, right through to quite consumer-facing, customer service-related reviews as well. We're also looking from a social policy lens, so domestic violence. And right now, I've just kicked off a review of how the tax office engages with Australia's Indigenous community, which is another important cohort within our taxpaying community that our government requires every department to make sure it tailors its services to each and every member of the community. Now, you might want to know in particular about why it's worth Australia investing in having a tax ombudsman separate from all other forms of ombud oversight government work. So let me explain the benefits that I think Australia has gained. First and foremost, as I know everybody here on this call will recognise, the tax office has significant powers over the community. The fact that it can enforce debt, take criminal prosecutions, can bankrupt people, can destroy businesses, can destroy people's lives, can take money from your bank account. There are significant powers that rest in the Commission of Taxation. And therefore, it is really important for the trust in the government and the trust in our democratic and liberal democracies that the community and every taxpayer have confidence that those powers are being exercised responsibly. Now, that requires a dedicated resource. Before my office existed, the tax office was being scrutinised by the Commonwealth Ombudsman, who scrutinises every single government department And while obviously that Ombud was doing a very good job, it did mean that their capacity to scrutinise the tax office was limited, because they also had to cover employment matters, defence matters, welfare matters, incarceration and correction centres, child support. So tax was just one very small part of that Ombud responsibilities, whereas for me, every single day I come into work looking at trying to make the tax office fairer and to make sure those checks and balances are working in the system. So I think our ability to cover tax because of it dedicated has been a benefit for the community, in a way that if I was just, if tax was just one of 20 or 30 different departments that I was looking at, that wouldn't have so much control or coverage. Secondly, I think the benefit of having a separate tax ombudsman is in the specialism. Again, you will appreciate tax can be complex, tax can be quite technical, and I employ a lot of tax specialists, including some tax lawyers. So it's really great that my office can go kind of toe-to-toe with the tax office, because we have the specialism, we have the understanding to be able to take to task and to hold to account the tax office if we need to, because of our specialist expertise and knowledge. And I think we only gain that because we are a specialist ombudsman too. But the third angle I would also highlight of why it's been a benefit for us to engage as a specialist ombudsman is because the stakeholder of the community that we work with, again, are quite specialist. We spend a lot of time engaging with the community and the tax professional community, which again, if I was just a generic and general ombudsman looking at all government services, I wouldn't have the time to spend engaging with tax professionals, tax professional bodies, community representatives who are only interested in tax or debt matters. And we would engage with those organisations 2, 3, 4 times a week. So it's a dedicated resource that we need to make sure that we are listening, engaging and hearing insights and experiences, evidence from that, those professional bodies who really do value the role that we play, because we can work symbiotically between the professional bodies, still independent, but separately with them. And I think having that dedicated resource does help. Now, very quickly, just turning to, so what are the issues involved in having a separate ombud focused very much on tax, separate from overall government ombudsman and oversight? I guess, first of all, I would call out resources. My office is extremely small. I have a very small budget. It's dedicated, but compared to the overall government ombudsman, we are very small. And so there is a real limit to what I can achieve with the resources that I've got. Whereas if I were in a bigger office, even though there would be choices about where that ombudsman spent his or her time, they may choose to invest more time on tax. And obviously there are economies of scale, because I have to provide my own support services. I have to provide my own ICT, HR, finance, etc. So that really is one difficult issue I'm sure you would all relate to. The second issue is about awareness. So most people know in the community that there's an ombudsman somewhere that they can complain to if they've got issues with government services. In Australia, I don't know about your country, but in Australia, very few people know there's a dedicated tax ombudsman. And so it takes a lot of my time to raise awareness within the community that my office exists, and that should people need our services, they know how to access our services. So raising awareness is a hard job, because people only need to know about you when they need to know about you. And by that time, it could well be too late that they don't know who to raise a complaint with. So awareness is a big issue, and general communications with the community. And then I think the third issue just worth being aware of and for everybody to kind of reflect on is our independence and our relationship with the tax office. Because we are dedicated, we clearly spend a lot of time working with the Australian Tax Office. We have a professional and respectful relationship with the tax office. I respect that the role that they play. In Australia, we do have a well-administered tax system. So I am looking for cracks in the system or flaws in the way that they're delivering the service, not overall maladministration or malfeasance in office. But that means I need to spend a lot of time with officials within the tax office. I need to have a good relationship with them in order to influence and to have impact in the way that they think about their services. And that does mean we are under scrutiny sometimes about how close we are to the tax office, and obviously the amount of influence I have. Like all ombuds, my recommendations are not mandated. I can't force the Commissioner of Tax to take on my recommendations, so I'm working with a degree of building soft power and influence with the relationships that I have with the tax office. So I guess I would say, because I'm dedicated, that relationship between having that soft power, influence, and impact through influencing the tax office was one thing, while also making sure that I am seen to be separate, seen to be independent, and understood that I'm here to make sure that the tax office works. The tax office the tax administration in Australia is fair and reasonable, and that the community has a resource to approach should they need to raise issues about fairness in the tax system or more serious issues to raise. I would love to stay in touch with anybody that's interested in how we conduct our affairs in the Tax Ombudsman in Australia. Please reach out to us. I'm sure we can make our details available through IOI. We'd love to hear from anyone else who does specialist ombud services or anyone else who's conducting tax checks and balances within the systems and tax ombuds all around the world. Thank you for your time. I hope you found this session useful and keen to stay in touch and to address.
Okay, that's the end. It seems that's the end of the video recording. I'm sure you found the presentation of the Tax Ombuds of Australia highly insightful as well, in showing how a specialized and independent oversight body strengthens fairness and trust in tax administration in general, and accountability as well. I think maybe just as I reflect on what was presented to us, perhaps one thing that came out that as a takeout is the office's independence again, that it's focused on quite a lot in terms of taxation and complaints, systemic tax-related complaints, and its role in improving fairness within the powerful enforcement environment where you find tax authorities have quite significant recovery and prosecution powers. And she also emphasized the benefits of specialization, including the office's deeper expertise in quite complex tax matters and stronger engagement with stakeholders, taxpayers, and other professionals as well, because it's quite a technical area. It could require of them to retain some certain consultants and professionals to be able to undertake the work that they do, more particularly as they address systemic issues. I think thirdly, the issue around some of the key challenges that she highlighted, including the low public awareness of the office. So she needs to embark in more aggressive awareness campaigns to be able to reach out to a lot more people. So there's that need for strong outreach and her reliance on soft power recommendations rather than binding decisions as well, and the requirement for close engagement with tax authorities, which at times increases scrutiny from the public and I guess from authorities as well. So overall, the presentation demonstrated how specialized tax ombuds enhances accountability and fairness in tax systems, while also balancing influence, independence, and practical operational limitations. I think with that said, we should move on now to the questions and answer session. I'd like to thank all our distinguished speakers for the rich and thought-provoking presentations. The presentations illustrated how the different sectoral ombudsman institutions contribute meaningfully to access to justice, accountability, consumer protection, ethical administration, and systemic reform, I must say, public trust in governance systems. So we now move on to our interactive discussion and question and answer session. I should also point out perhaps at this point that we did receive both pre-submitted and live questions from participants across the continent, and I will direct selected questions to the panel. And as is our general practice, participants are also informed that where there is insufficient time for all the questions to be addressed during the webinar, participants may respond to remaining questions in writing afterwards, and the IOC will share the responses with participants accordingly. I'm not sure if we do have any questions coming up directly. Okay. It seems we have quite a lot of questions, so if there is no time for responses, I think we have about 10 minutes now that is left. We can take questions for at least 5 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes would be about our closing remarks, brief reflections on the presentations in general, and transition again to the closure. Oh, I'm informed that, the questions and answers will be shared with the panelists, and then the participants will be provided with the answers thereafter, because we do not have adequate time to address all of them. Or maybe we can actually take one or two of the questions. Marianne?
There is a question that says, my employer did not remit my pension dues to the RBA for 3 years, and to date I have not received this payment. How can I go about recovering it? That's for the pensions adjudicator. Thank you.
Pensions adjudicator, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just to respond briefly, and I'm assuming that this is someone in South Africa. And if you're someone in South Africa, you can lodge a complaint with the adjudicator about those outstanding contributions. All you need to do is complete a written complaint form with us, which you can submit either digitally or in person, and then we'll do the rest. So we'll join the employer to the proceedings, and the fund will determine how much has not been paid, and then we will then conclude the investigation and issue an appropriate order at that time. So that process usually takes about 6 months to conclude, but it can be less than that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. And another one, Mario.
When there is prescription expiry due to lapse of time, prescription, is there no other amicable means of resolving the dispute? I think that can be addressed to both practitioners, both ombudsmen. Thank you.
And I don't know if I should leave it to the NFO to respond to this, but from our side, if a matter is prescribed, then unfortunately we won't be able to forcefully investigate it, but we can try to facilitate a solution that's amicable, but that is at the mercy of the parties as well, being willing to engage. Some respondents will say the matter is prescribed and I'm not going to respond to anything else in relation to the complaint, and some would remain amenable to trying to resolve that dispute. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. One last one.
Hi, sorry, was
Okay.
that a question about what happens if the matter is prescribed? I'm not sure if I
Yes.
had. Okay, we will look at it. So we do have prescription rules, but we will just, in the interest of fairness and justice, to see, so it's not an absolute prescription in that we will still have a look to see if there's a reason, the length of time, and you know, consider it to see if we should dismiss it on prescription or not. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, actually it does. It does. Is there any other third one that we can take before we move on to the next?
One more.
Session?
With many
Yes.
people having a limited understanding of retirement benefits, what practical initiatives or reforms are being considered to improve financial literacy and public awareness? That's for the pension fund. Thank you.
Yes. So the FSCA has a program that they're running in terms of helping improve financial literacy levels in South Africa. But also ourselves, alongside the Ombudsman Council, there's work that we do in terms of improving awareness of the financial system, the mechanisms that are there to resolve disputes, and how those disputes can be resolved. So we do have an extensive public awareness program, which we conduct alongside the Ombudsman Council to educate people about our services. And I think we're starting to see the benefits of that, because in the recently concluded financial year, we received over 13,000 complaints, which is a record we've never, in the almost 30 years of existence of the office, we've never received as many complaints as that, which is some evidence that indicates that people are becoming more and more aware of the services that we render. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we unfortunately may not be able to address all the questions today, but the richness of the discussion reflects the importance of continued continental dialogue on these very issues. So in the interest of time, I think we should just move on to the next segment. I request the panelists to issue a wrap-up. Perhaps if there's anything, but I don't think we do even have adequate time for that. I think at this point, perhaps if we could provide closing remarks as we conclude today's webinar. Allow me to express sincere appreciation to all speakers for sharing their expertise and practical insights, to all participants for the thoughtful engagement throughout. Today's discussion has reaffirmed the important contribution of sectoral ombudsman institutions in promoting fairness, accountability, citizen protection, and economic justice across Africa. We've also seen how pension, insurance, and tax ombuds offices complement national ombuds institutions by strengthening access to effective remedies, improving administrative responsiveness, identifying systemic challenges, and enhancing public trust in institutions that directly affect people's daily lives. I think most importantly, today's webinar reminds us that accountable institutions remain essential to the broader aspirations of Agenda 2063 and to the development of responsive, transparent, and citizen-centered governance systems across our continent. So as we commemorate Africa Day 2026, may we continue strengthening institutions that uphold dignity, fairness, ethical administration, and access to justice for all. I'd like to thank the AORC, AOMA, the IOI, all speakers, interpreters, organizers, participants for making this engagement possible. Thank you very much. And I think with that said, it is now my pleasure to invite Mayor Marion Adonis to deliver a vote of thanks. Mayor Marion, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Polaki. Good day, CEO, facilitator, distinguished speakers, colleagues, ombudsman practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. As we come to the close of today's webinar, it is my privilege on behalf of the African Ombudsman Research Centre to extend our sincere appreciation to everyone who helped make this engagement both meaningful and successful. Firstly, we wish to express our heartfelt gratitude to our speakers for generously sharing their expertise, practical experiences, and insights with us today. To Mr. Lebogang Mogashoa, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Pension Funds Adjudicator of South Africa, thank you for helping us better understand the important role pension ombudsman institutions play in protecting citizens and strengthening accountability within retirement and pension systems. To Ms. Denise Gabriels from the National Financial Ombuds Scheme of South Africa, thank you for your insightful contribution on protecting policyholders, promoting fairness and supporting national oversight within the financial services environment. Your presentation reminded us how sectoral ombudsman institutions contribute directly to public trust and responsive governance. To Ms. Ruth Owen, Tax Ombudsman of Australia, thank you for your valuable international perspective, which you shared through your video presentation. Your reflections on systemic oversight, taxpayer protection, specialised expertise, and maintaining public confidence in revenue administration gave us much to consider as African institutions continue to evolve in this space. We also extend our sincere appreciation to our facilitator, Honourable Advocate Klotliso Polaki, Ombudsman of Lesotho, for guiding today's discussion with professionalism and warmth. A special word of thanks goes to the chairperson of the African Ombudsman Research Centre Board and the Public Protector of South Africa, Advocate Koleka Kaleka, as well as the leadership of AORC, AOMA, the International Ombudsman Institute, UKZN, DIRCO, and all our supporting partners for continuing to invest in capacity building, peer learning, and strengthening accountability institutions across Africa. We are also deeply grateful to all the participants who joined us from across Africa and beyond. There were 220 registrations and over 130 people attended the webinar. Your engagement, your questions, your commitment to advancing fairness, accountability, and citizen-centered governance are what gives life and meaning to these platforms. Today's webinar reminded us that ombudsman institutions, whether national or sectoral, remain essential pillars of democracy, good governance, and public trust. As Africa continues to strengthen its institutions, collaboration, shared learning, and professional exchanges such as this become increasingly important. In the spirit of Africa Day, may we continue working together to build accountable institutions that protect rights, promote fairness, and strengthen justice across our continent. Thank you once again to everyone who contributed to today's successful engagement. The next webinar will be on the 7th of July 2026 with the title, Protecting Whistleblowers, Safeguarding Integrity and Preventing Retaliation. Please watch out for the save the date, which will be sent to you in due course. Obrigada, merci, gracias, shukran. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.